The Montana Territory stretched endlessly white under the December sky of 1876. And Samuel Sam Morrison knew that meant death was riding close. 20 years of cutting timber in these mountains had taught him to read the land's moods like scripture. This blizzard wasn't just fierce, it was the kind that buried men whole and didn't give them. Back until spring, Sam pulled his wool coat tighter as he guided his ox team through the deepening snow toward his cabin. The animals snorted clouds of steam, their massive hooves breaking through the crust with each labored step. Behind them, the loaded sled groaned under the weight of freshly cut pine logs, the day's work that would keep him fed through the winter months. The wind howled through the towering pines, making them creak and sway like giant ship masts. Sam had lived alone in these mountains for 8 years now. Ever since Martha's fever took her and left him with nothing but memories and an empty bed, the solitude suited him fine. People brought complications, and complications got a man killed. Out here, but as he rounded the bend near Crow Creek, something dark against the white caught his eye. At first he thought it might be a fallen tree, or maybe a deer carcass. Then the wind shifted, and he saw the unmistakable shape of a human, form lying motionless in the snow. Sam's hand instinctively moved to the rifle secured to his sled. In these parts, a man didn't approach strangers without caution. Raiders, claim jumpers, and worse, roamed these mountains. But as he drew closer, squinting through the swirling snow, he realized this wasn't an ambush waiting to happen. The figure was barely breathing. Sam climbed down from his sled, his boots crunching through snow that came up to his knees. The man lying before him was Apache. That much was clear from his buckskin clothing, and the distinctive silver and turquoise ornaments that hadn't been stolen by whoever had left him to die. A ragged wound crossed his chest, dark blood staining the white ground beneath him. The Apache's eyes fluttered open as Sam knelt beside him. They were dark as river stones, filled with pain but alert. No fever madness, no death glaze. This man was hurt bad, but he was still fighting. "Easy there," Sam said quietly, though he doubted the Apache spoke English. "You're in a bad way, eh?" The wounded man's lips moved, speaking words in his native tongue that Sam couldn't understand. But he recognized the tone, not pleading, not frightened, resigned maybe. Like a man who'd made peace with dying, Sam looked around the empty landscape. No horse, no weapons, no supplies. Someone had beaten this Apache, shot him, and left him to freeze. In Sam's book, that made whoever did it lower than the wolves that howled in these mountains, the practical voice in his head was the one that had kept him alive all these years, told him to keep moving. Apache meant trouble. The tribes and the settlers had been going at each other's throats for years, with blood spilled on both sides. Helping this man could bring a war party to his door. Worse, the cavalry asking questions he couldn't answer. But as Sam stared down at the dying man, another voice spoke louder. It sounded like Martha, who used to say that a person's true measure came in moments when nobody was watching. "Damn it all," Sam muttered, making his decision. He went back to his sled and retrieved his heavy blankets. The Apache watched him with those steady dark eyes as Sam wrapped him carefully, trying not to jar the wound. The man was dead weight, but Sam had spent years hauling logs, and his muscles were iron-hard from the work. Getting the Apache onto the sled without killing him took patience Sam wasn't sure he had. Every second in this wind meant the cold was reaching deeper into both their bones. But finally he had the wounded man secured among the logs, wrapped tight against the elements. The journey back to his cabin usually took 30 minutes. Today it took an hour, with Sam walking alongside the oxen to keep them steady and checking constantly to make sure his unexpected passenger was still breathing by the time they reached the small log cabin tucked into a grove of sheltering pines. Full dark had fallen, and the snow was coming down so thick Sam could barely see his own hands. He unhitched the oxen and led them to the small barn he'd built behind the cabin, making sure they had feed and water for the night. Then came the hard part. The Apache was conscious but weak as Sam half carried, half dragged him into the cabin. The interior was sparse, but warm: a stone fireplace, a sturdy table, 2 chairs, and a bed built into the corner. Sam had been planning to sleep on the floor anyway. Winter nights were cold enough that he often pulled his bedroll close to the fire. He settled the Apache on the bed and lit the oil lamp to get a better look at the wound. What he saw made him whistle low through his teeth. A rifle bullet had torn through the man's chest, missing the heart and lungs by inches. It had gone clean through, which was good. No digging for metal fragments. But he'd lost a lot of blood. An infection was always the real killer. Sam heated water and cleaned the wound as best he could, using strips torn from his spare shirt for bandages. The Apache endured it all, without a sound. Those dark eyes never leaving Sam's face, watching, evaluating, trying to understand. Why a white man would risk everything to save an enemy. Truth was, Sam wasn't entirely sure himself. When the bandaging was done, Sam offered water from his dipper. The Apache drank gratefully, and Sam saw strength returning to those eyes. Not much, but enough to suggest this man might actually survive the night. Outside, the wind howled like all the demons in hell were loose. The blizzard would last another day at least, maybe two, which meant Sam was committed now. Like it, or not. He settled into his chair by the fire, rifled across his knees, and watched the Apache sleep. Tomorrow would bring its own troubles. Tonight, he just had to keep them both alive. The flames danced in the fireplace, casting shifting shadows. On the cabin walls, Sam thought about Martha, about the choices that led a man to live alone in the mountains, about the strange turns life could take in a single afternoon. One thing was certain, nothing would ever be quite the same. Dawn brought silence that felt almost unnatural after the night's howling wind. Sam woke in his chair to find the Apache watching him, those dark eyes alert and calculating. The fever that had set in during the night was breaking, and the wounded man's breathing was stronger. "Morning," Sam said, stretching the kinks from his neck. He dozed fitfully, waking every hour to check on his patient and feed the fire. "How are you feeling?" The Apache said something in his own language, then surprised Sam by switching to heavily accented English. "Why you help me?" Sam blinked. In all his years on the frontier, he'd met maybe 3 Apache who spoke English, and none well enough for conversation. "You speak the language?" "Mission school," the Apache said simply, before ... He gestured vaguely at himself, at the situation. "Why you help enemy?" What's a fair question, and Sam found himself considering it seriously. "Don't reckon I see you as an enemy. See you as a man who got shot and left to die. Hey, right? No matter who's doing it." The Apache studied him for a long moment. "My name is LONER. In your words, ... he who walks between storms. Sam Morrison." "Oh. Folks just call me Sam." LONER nodded slowly. "You are alone here. Have been for some years now. No woman? No children? Had a wife once. Fever took her." Sam stood and moved too. "The stove? You hungry? Got some salt pork and beans?" As Sam prepared a simple breakfast, Nalnish struggled to sit up. The effort cost him. But he managed it with the stubborn determination Sam recognized in men who'd spent their lives fighting for survival. "The men who shot me," Nalnish said carefully. "They wear blue coats. Soldiers. But they act like bandits." Tss. Hands stilled on the coffee pot. Row cavalry was bad news for everyone. "How many?" "Maybe 7. They take horses from my village. When I follow," they had touched his chest. "Think they kill me? Your village know you're missing?" Nalnish was quiet for so long Sam thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, "Yes, they know." There was weight in those words, implications that made Sam's stomach tighten. "They'll come looking, yes. How long before they figure you came this way?" "Storm covers tracks. Maybe 3 days, maybe 4. Sam served up plates of food and strong coffee. They ate in silence, each man lost in his own thoughts. Outside, the snow had stopped, but the drifts were piled high against the windows. It would be at least another day before travel was possible.
"Al?"
"Me about these soldiers," Sam said finally. Nalnish set down his fork. "Their leader, he has yellow hair, scar on his left hand, rides black horse with white star on face. They camp near Blue Rock Canyon." Sam knew the place, a natural fortress about 15 miles south. If rogue cavalry was holed up there, it explained. Why supply wagons had been going missing between Fort McKinney and the mining camps. How many in your village? Sam asked. 40 warriors, many more women and children. Sam did the math. 40 Apache warriors against a handful of crooked soldiers wouldn't be much of a fight. But if the Apache came here first, looking for LONER, and found him in a white man's cabin, your people, Sam said carefully, they're going to assume I'm involved with those soldiers. LONER met his eyes. Yes. At least the man was honest. Sam appreciated that, even if it wasn't particularly comforting. The day passed slowly. Sam tended to LONER's wound, which was healing cleaner than he'd expected. The Apache slept frequently, his body fighting too. Repair the damage. When he was awake, they talked carefully at first, then with growing ease. Sam learned that LONER was a war leader, respected among his people for his skill in battle and his wisdom in council. He had fought the Mexican army, then the Americans, defending his homeland against waves of invaders who wanted the Apache to simply disappear. You ever think about just ... moving on? Sam asked during one of their conversations. Finding some place where there's no fighting? LONER looked at him with something that might have been pity. This is our home. Our ancestors are buried in these mountains. The spirits of our people live in these rocks, these trees. You ask me to cut out my heart and throw it away? Sam nodded slowly. He'd felt something similar about his own land, though he'd never been able to put it into words like that. By evening, LONER was strong enough to stand and walk a few steps. The wound was still serious, but it wouldn't kill him barring infection. Or reopening, which meant decisions had to be made. I can probably get you back to your people, Sam said as they shared another simple meal. Might be able to avoid any misunderstandings. And then I reckon I'll have to decide whether to pack up and leave, or stay and hope your folks don't hold my helping you against me. LONER was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his words were careful, measured. There is another way. I'm listening. The soldiers who shot me, they are a problem for your people too. Yes, they steal, they kill. The white chiefs, they would want these bad soldiers stopped. Sam frowned. You're talking about an alliance? I am talking about justice, and about two men who understand that. Some things are bigger than the color of their skin, Tal called through the darkness. Sam stared into the fire, thinking about choices and consequences, about the life he'd built in these mountains, and whether it was worth fighting. Your people would listen to you about something like that. Some would. Others, ... double quotes LONER shrugged. Others would say, I am fool to trust white man. But if we bring them proof, if we show that not all whites are enemies, ... that's a big if. Yes. But sometimes big risks bring big rewards. Sam looked at this Apache warrior who should have been his enemy, who was instead proposing they work together against a common threat. It was crazy, it was dangerous. It was probably going to get them both killed. All right, Sam said. Let's talk about how we might do this thing. The wind picked up again outside, but somehow the cabin felt warmer than it had in years. 3 days later, the snow had melted enough for travel. LONER could ride, though not for long distances, and Sam had rigged a travois behind his horse to carry supplies. They set out at dawn, heading toward Blue Rock Canyon and whatever waited. There, the landscape was transformed by the storm. Where once there had been familiar trails, now there were only suggestions beneath the white blanket. Sam navigated by landmarks he'd memorized over years of solitary hunting. Lightning-struck pine here, an oddly shaped boulder there. LONER rode behind him on Sam's spare horse, a sturdy mare that had seen better days but still had heart. The Apache sat his saddle with the easy grace of a man born to horseback, despite his healing wound. Tell me about these rogue soldiers, Sam said as they rode. How long have they been operating? 2 months, maybe 3? All was the same. They take horses, cattle, sometimes women. Always leave bodies. Your lawmen. They blame Apache. That made sense. It was easier for the territorial authorities to blame Indian raids than admit they couldn't control their own soldiers. Sam had seen it before, corruption that went all The way up the chain of command, they stopped frequently to rest Nalnish. And during one of these breaks, Sam voiced the concern that had been growing in his mind. "What happens when we find these soldiers? You're in no shape for a fight, and I'm just one man." Nalnish smiled grimly. "We do not fight. We watch. We learn. Then we bring others. Others. Your sheriff, your soldiers who are not corrupt. Warriors who are willing to listen." Nalnish leaned against a tree, favoring his wounded side. "But first, we must have proof that even doubters cannot ignore." By afternoon, they were close enough to Blue Rock Canyon to smell wood smoke on the wind. Sam called a halt, and they approached on foot, leaving the horses tied in a grove of aspens about a mile back. The canyon was a natural stronghold, with high walls and only 2 ways in or out, perfect for defense, but also perfect for trapping. Whoever was inside if you had enough men. Sam and Nalnish belly crawled to the rim and peered down into the hidden valley. What they saw made Sam's blood run cold. The rogue soldiers had built themselves a comfortable camp. 5 large tents, a rope corral holding at least 30 horses, and supply wagons stacked with goods that clearly hadn't been come by honestly. But it was the people that made Sam's hands clench into fists. 3 Apache women sat bound near one of the tents. Even from this distance, Sam could see they'd been beaten. Near them, 2 white men, probably merchants from the look of their clothes, were tied to wagon wheels. One wasn't moving. "Son of a bitch," Sam muttered. Nalnish's face was stone, but his eyes burned. "My sister's daughter," he said quietly, pointing to the youngest of the women. 16 summers. Sam counted 7 soldiers moving around the camp. Their leader was easy to spot, a tall man with yellow hair and sergeant stripes, the scar on his left hand visible even at this distance. His black horse with the white star grazed in the corral, confirming Nalnish's identification. "We've seen enough," Sam said. "Let's get out of here." But as they started to crawl backward, voices carried up from the canyon below. The yellow-haired sergeant was talking to his men, and the wind carried his words clearly. ... Getting too hot. Around here, time to move the operation south. We'll sell the horses in Santa Fe, have ourselves a fine old time with the women, then head for Mexico. Another voice. "What about the merchant?" "Kill him. Bury him with his partner. Far as anyone knows, they never made it through Apache territory." Sam felt Nalnish tense beside him. This was worse than simple robbery. These men were planning to disappear with their captives, leaving behind only bodies and evidence that would fuel more hatred between whites and Apache. They made it back to their horses without incident. But the ride to Sam's cabin was grim. Both men were lost in dark thoughts, wrestling with the implications of what they'd seen. "How long before they move?" Sam asked as they unsaddled the horses in his barn. "Soon. Maybe tomorrow night. They know Storm will bring search parties when weather clears." Inside the cabin, Sam poured coffee and tried to think. 7 armed men in a defensive position with hostages. Even if he could reach the fort and convince the commanding officer to send troops, it would take 2 days minimum. By then, the rogues would be gone. "Your warriors," Sam said. "How fast could they get here?" Nalnish considered. "If I send word tonight, they could be here by dawn tomorrow. But they'll want to attack immediately, and people will die." "Yes, and afterwards your people will say, 'Apache attacked soldiers.' Truth will not matter." Sam stared into the fire, thinking about the bound women, the beaten merchants, the casual way the sergeant had ordered murder. Then he thought about his quiet life in these mountains, the peace he'd built after losing Martha. "There might be another way," he said slowly. "Tell me. What if we could separate the soldiers from their hostages, draw them out, make them vulnerable?" Nalnish leaned forward. "How?" Sam was quiet for a long moment, working through the details of a plan that was either brilliant or suicidal. "They think you're dead, right? What if you weren't? What if you came back from the grave to haunt them?" Understanding dawned in Nalnish's eyes. "You want me to show myself? Make them think spirits? Hunt them? I want you to terrify them into making mistakes." "Men who are scared don't think straight." Sam met the Apache's gaze. "But it means putting yourself at tremendous risk. If they catch you, It will not catch me. This is my land. I know every rock, every tree. Nalnish smiled grimly. And you are right, scared men make mistakes. They spent the rest of the evening planning. It was dangerous, complex, and depended on perfect timing. But if it worked, they might save the hostages and expose the truth about the rogue soldiers. If it failed, Sam knew he'd probably never see another sunrise. As they prepared for sleep, Nalnish spoke quietly. You know that helping me has changed everything. Your old life, it is gone now. Sam nodded. He'd known that from the moment he decided to pull a dying Apache from the snow. Some changes are worth making. And if we both die tomorrow, Sam thought. About Martha? About the empty years since her death? About the bound women in the canyon and the casual cruelty of evil men? Then at least we'll die for something that matters. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines, carrying the scent of snow and the promise of dawn. Tomorrow would bring the test of everything they'd planned. Everything they'd hoped for. Tonight. Two unlikely allies shared coffee and quiet conversation, preparing to risk everything for justice in the slim hope that understanding might triumph. Over hatred, the fire burned low, casting dancing shadows on the cabin walls. Neither man slept much, but both felt more alive than they had in years. Dawn came gray and cold, with ice crystals glittering on the remaining snow. Sam stood at his cabin window, watching the tree line and thinking about the day ahead. The plan they'd crafted seemed solid enough. But plans had a way of falling apart when bullets started flying. Nalnish was already up, checking his weapons and preparing for what might be his last hunt. The Apache moved with careful precision, every gesture economical and purposeful. The wound in his chest was healing, but Sam could see it still pained him. You sure about this? Sam asked, handing him coffee. I'm sure that doing nothing is worse than dying trying. They reviewed the plan one more time. Nalnish would approach the canyon from the north, using his knowledge of Apache tactics to harass the soldiers and drive them south, toward the narrow pass. Sam would be waiting there with his rifle, ready to provide cover and help coordinate with whatever law enforcement they could summon. It was a long shot. But it was all they had. At mid-morning, Nalnish prepared to leave. He checked his rifle, secured his knife, and painted traditional war markings on his face with clay and charcoal. The transformation was startling. The wounded man Sam had nursed back to health disappeared, replaced by a warrior who seemed to embody the wild spirit of the mountains themselves. If this goes wrong, Nalnish said, tell my people I died with honor. You tell them yourself when this is over. They clasped hands to men who had found common ground in an unlikely place. Then Nalnish mounted his horse and rode north. Disappearing into the timber like a ghost, Sam spent the next hour gathering his own gear, extra ammunition, field glasses, his sharpest knife. He was checking his rifle when he heard something that made his blood freeze, hoofbeats, many of them. Coming fast from the south, Sam grabbed his field glasses and climbed to the cabin's small loft, peering out through the window. What he saw made him wonder if he was losing his mind. Riders, dozens of them, spread out in a loose line across the valley floor. All Apache, all armed, all moving with the disciplined precision of a war party. At their head rode a figure Sam recognized, an older Apache with silver hair and the bearing of a chief. Jesus Christ, Sam whispered. This wasn't part of the plan. He climbed down from the loft and stepped outside, rifle in hand but not raised. The lead riders were already close enough to see his face, and Sam knew that in the next few minutes, he'd either be explaining himself or dying. The war party halted 50 yards from his cabin. The silver-haired chief rode forward alone, his dark eyes taking in every detail of Sam's homestead. When he spoke, his English was clear and precise. You are the one called Sam Morrison. I am Mangas, war chief of the Chiricahua. My nephew Nalnish was seen entering this place 3 days ago. He has not returned. Sam's mind raced. If Nalnish's people had been watching, they would have seen him leave this morning, which meant they were testing Sam, seeing if he would lie. Your nephew was here, Sam said carefully. He was wounded. I helped him heal. And where is he now? Looked at the mounted warriors, at their painted faces and ready weapons. He thought about Nalnish, probably already moving into position near the canyon. If Sam told the truth, these warriors would ride to help him and probably ruin any chance of saving the hostages. He rode out this morning, Sam said. There are soldiers holding prisoners at Blue Rock Canyon. Bad soldiers. He went to scout them. Mangus studied him for a long moment. These soldiers, they're the ones who shot my nephew. Yes, and you helped him plan to fight them. It wasn't a question. Sam nodded. The war chief turned to his warriors and spoke rapidly in Apache. Sam caught only a few words, but the tone was unmistakable. They were discussing whether to kill him or trust him. Finally, Mangus turned back. My nephew spoke of you in the messages he sent. He said you could be trusted. We will see. Before Sam could ask what messages, the sound of distant gunfire echoed across the mountains. Single shots, spaced and deliberate. Nolnish had begun his harassment of the soldier camp. Mangus smiled grimly. He always was impatient. The war chief raised his hand, and his warriors began moving toward the sound of gunfire. But instead of the wild charge Sam expected, they spread out in small groups, moving with tactical precision. Wait, Sam called. There are hostages in that camp. Apache women, white merchants. If you attack, we know about the hostages, Mangus said. Why do you think we brought 500 warriors? Sam's jaw dropped. 500. He looked around wildly and realized what he'd missed. The riders he could see were just the advance guard. Through the trees, more Apache were moving groups of 5 and 10, spreading out to surround the entire canyon complex. How long have you been planning this? Sam asked. Since the day my nephew was shot. We tracked the soldiers to their hideout, counted their numbers, studied their habits. We were waiting for the right moment. Mangus's eyes glittered. My nephew's message this morning said that moment had come. The distant gunfire was getting more frequent now. The sound of horses moving fast. Nolnish was doing his job, driving the soldiers toward panic. Mount up, Mangus ordered. It is time to end this. Sam saddled his horse and followed the war party toward Blue Rock Canyon. As they rode, Mangus explained the plan that Nolnish had apparently been coordinating all along. The 500 Apache warriors had been positioning themselves around the canyon for 2 days, waiting for the signal to attack. When Nolnish began his harassment, it would drive the soldiers toward the southern pass, where the bulk of the Apache force was waiting. But what about the hostages? Sam asked. The first group to enter the canyon will secure them, Mangus replied. My nephew will guide them to safety while the soldiers are distracted. It was a masterful plan, Sam realized. The kind of coordinated operation that required tremendous discipline and trust. And somehow, without realizing it, he'd become part of it. They reached the canyon rim just as the main assault began. Sam watched in amazement as Apache warriors poured into the hidden valley from 3 directions at once. The rogue soldiers, already panicked by Nolnish's ghostly attacks, were caught completely off guard. The fight was brief and decisive. Within minutes, the yellow-haired sergeant and his men were either dead or captured. The hostages were freed. The stolen goods recovered. The evidence of the soldiers' crimes laid bare for all to see. Sam found Nolnish near the corral, helping his young relative to her feet. The Apache warrior looked exhausted but triumphant. You didn't tell me about the 500 warriors? Sam said. Nolnish smiled. You did not ask. Besides, would you have helped if you knew? Sam considered that. Probably. But I might have asked for more coffee first. As the Apache cleaned up the canyon and prepared to escort the surviving captives to safety, Mangus approached Sam again. You have proven yourself today, the war chief said. My people will remember this. Your cabin, your land they are under. Our protection now. Any who would harm you will answer to the Chiricahua. It was an extraordinary offer, Sam realized. In a land where Apache and white settlers were mortal enemies, he was being offered something like sanctuary. What happens now? Sam asked. Now we take these criminals to your fort. We show your people the truth about who is raiding, who is killing. Perhaps some will listen, and if they don't, Mangus shrugged. Then at least we will have tried. Sometimes that is enough. As the war party prepared to leave, Nolnish approached Sam one last time. Thank you, the Apache warrior said simply. for saving my life, for helping my people, for showing me that not all whites are enemies. Thank you for showing me the same. Thing about Apache. They shook hands, these two unlikely allies who had found common ground in the wilderness. Around them, Apache warriors and rescued hostages prepared for the journey to Fort McKinney, carrying with them proof that justice was still possible on the frontier. Sam watched them go, then rode slowly back to his cabin. The sun was setting. Behind the mountains, painting the snow-covered peaks in shades of gold and red. His valley looked the same as always, but everything had changed. He was no longer just a loner cutting timber in the wilderness. He was part of something larger now, connected to the land and its people in ways he was only beginning to understand. That night, as he sat by his fire with coffee and his thoughts, Sam heard the distant sound of wolves howling in the mountains. But somehow they didn't sound lonely anymore. They sounded like they were singing.